Welcome to 2018 In-Service Training for Hazardous Materials. I'm Lieutenant Manning of the Durham County Sheriff's Office, and I'll be your primary instructor for this block of instruction. Hazardous materials can be found all around us. They are stored under our sinks, in our closets, and in our storage buildings. We pass by them in larger quantities on the highways, railways, and industries. Most of the time, there isn't an issue with their presence. However, this can quickly change when there is a traffic accident, spill, or even illegal activity. The fact is, most people are near hazardous materials on a daily basis, whether we realize it or not. The goal is to raise your awareness of hazardous materials in your everyday surroundings and enhance the way you think of hazardous materials while providing the knowledge necessary to protect yourself and others through proper and early identification and notification of resources. During this block of instruction, we should be able to cover the following training objectives. You should be able to define hazardous materials and the risk associated with them during a hazardous materials incident. Describe the duties of an awareness level first responder at the scene of a hazardous materials incident. Also list the methods used to recognize the presence of a hazardous material to include the identification of the possible material or substance based on readily available clues. Demonstrate the ability to use the DOT Emergency Response Guidebook in identifying a hazardous material and appropriate first responder actions to include notifying additional resources. Also explain what WISER is and how to use it as a resource when at the scene of a suspected hazardous materials incident. Finally, identify the occurrence of a natural gas leak and what protective measures to take to assure life safety until the leak can be mitigated. As emergency responders and emergency personnel, we live by the mantra to protect and serve the public. However, we must also work to protect ourselves during hazard material incidents. Emergency personnel must be aware of the presence of hazards and their potential threats in order to make the appropriate response to ensure the safety for themselves, other emergency personnel, and of course the public. We're going to talk about the definition of hazardous materials and hazardous substances. There are several definitions out there. We're going to talk about two. The first one being OSHA's definition, which is hazardous substance means any substance designated or listed under A through D of this definition, exposure to which results or may result in adverse effects on the health or safety of employees. Any substance defined under Section 103, subsection 14 of the Comprehensive Environmental Resource Compensation and Liability Act. Any biological agent and other disease-causing agent which after release into the environment and upon exposure, ingestion, inhalation, or assimilation into any person, either directly from the environment or indirectly by ingestion through food chains, will or may reasonably be anticipated to cause death, disease, behavioral abnormalities, cancer, genetic mutations, psychological malfunctions, or physical deformations in such persons or their offspring. Department of Transportation also has a definition for hazardous materials, and it is defined as any substance or material that could adversely affect the safety of the public, handlers, or carriers during transportation. There are 9 DOT hazard classifications. The first one is listed as 1, and that is explosives. Hazard Class 2 is compressed gases. Hazard Class 3 is flammable liquids. Hazard Class 4 is flammable solids. Hazard Class 5 is oxidizers and organic peroxides. Hazard Class 6 is your toxic materials. Hazard Class 7 is radioactive materials. Hazard Class 8 is corrosive substances. And Hazard Class 9 is miscellaneous. First responders, such as law enforcement officers, are classified as awareness level personnel according to OSHA and HAZWOPER standards. Responders at this awareness level shall have sufficient training or have had sufficient experience to objectively demonstrate competency in the following areas. Number 1, an understanding of what hazardous substances are and the risk associated with them in an incident. Number 2, an understanding of the potential outcomes associated with the emergency created when hazardous substances are present. The ability to recognize the presence of hazardous substances in an emergency. Number 4, the ability to identify the hazardous substance if possible. Number 5, an understanding of the role of the first responders, awareness individual in the employer's emergency response plan, including site security and control of the U.S. Department of Transportation's Emergency Response Guidebook. And finally, number 6, the ability to realize the need for additional resources and to make appropriate notifications to the Communications Center. Let's talk about some initial tactics. Before any emergency, you want to become familiar with the Emergency Response Guidebook, otherwise known as the ERG. You always want to resist rushing in. Furthermore, you want to approach incidents from upwind. And finally, you definitely want to stay clear of spills, vapors, fumes, smoke, or other suspicious sources. Recognition tips. Be aware of indicators from your senses. Observe the surroundings. Location of buildings. Container shapes and construction. Placards. Shipping papers. SDS sheets and MSDS sheets. Unlabeled containers with other indicators, persons exhibiting symptoms of exposure. All of these are clues. Every type of incident you go on, whether it be a hazmat related incident or not, is some type of mini investigation. And we don't like to refer to calls as routine, but it's something as routine as an alarm call at a residence. You're still forming a mini investigation while you conduct there. You do the same thing on hazardous materials spill. So if you have your senses are indicating that your eyes are burning or there's a pungent odor, that's a clue. And then you happen to see a tractor trailer that's overturned and it looks like a tanker of some sort, that's another clue. And then you use maybe some binos and you notice the placards. That's also a good clue that, hey, this might be a hazardous materials incident. Now let's talk about the Emergency Response Guidebook, or the ERG. You will need this book during this portion of the instruction. I want you to please examine your book and look at the different sections that can be clearly identified by observing the different colors indicated on the edge of the book. This allows you for a quick reference during an emergency. There are yellow pages. Before you get to the yellow pages, there is a section of white pages at the beginning of your ERG book. This has several instructions of how to use the book, where to call for emergency assistance, and an overview of the hazard classification system, and even an explanation of placards and other warning systems. The yellow pages are boarded near the beginning of the ERG book, just behind the white pages, and they are numerically sequenced, listing of a 4-digit hazardous material identification number, followed by a 3-digit emergency response guide number, and the name of the material. The guide numbers refer to orange bordered pages near the end of the book, which spell out the hazards encountered in the event of transportation-related release and the immediate emergency response procedures. The blue pages are the alphabetical index. These pages are similar to the yellow bordered pages, but are alphabetically sequenced by the name of the hazardous material. The orange pages, these are your response guides. They are for the emergency response guides, which indicate and include the potential hazards to health, risk of fire or explosion, and emergency response procedures. Finally, your green pages. This is your isolation and evacuation tables. The green border pages identify initial isolation and protective action distances. In previous editions of the ERG, certain materials for which the DOT had identified isolation and protective action distances were highlighted in yellow and in the yellow bordered pages and in blue bordered pages. This indicated that the emergency responders should refer to Table 1, which is initial isolation and protective action distances. Now all entries that require immediate reference to Table 1 are highlighted in green. Table 1 is located in the green bordered pages at the end of the book. How to use the guidebook? Well, there are 4 easy steps to this. Step 1. You want to identify the material by finding one of the following: either the 4-digit ID number on a placard, orange panel, or shipping document, the name of the material on the shipping document, placard, or package. If an ID number or the name of the material cannot be found, find the corresponding placard in front of the ERG and use the reference response guide number. If there is no identifying information and the material is believed to be hazardous, use ERG Guide number 111. If an explosive is suspected, but no name or UN number is present, use ERG Guide 112. Step 2. You want to find the appropriate 3-digit guide number in either the ID number index, which is the yellow bordered pages in the ERG book, the name of the material index, the blue bordered pages in the ERG. If the guide number is supplemented with the letter P, it indicates that the material may undergo violent polymerization if subject to heat or contamination. If the index entry is highlighted and there is no fire, find the ID number and the name of the material in the table of initial isolation and protective action distances. If necessary, begin protective actions immediately. Step 3. You want to turn to the numbered ERG, which is the orange border pages, and read carefully and completely. Now I want to talk about the acronym WISER, which stands for Wireless Information System for Emergency Responders. This is a new program, and this is a new update to our 2018 in-service training. It is a resource for first responders to use and figure out how to deal with a hazardous material incident like accidents involving tanker trucks or chemical plants. When first responders arrive at situations involving hazardous materials, they have to quickly assess the situations in order to protect people and the environment. To do this, they rely on information from several sources and resources, as well as common sense and environmental factors like wind direction. WISER helps gather chemical, biological, and radiological information from a lot of sources, including the National Library of Medicine's Hazardous Substance Data Bank. It also obtains information from the Department of Transportation and the ERG book as well. WISER actually aggregates the information into a useful and helpful application for Apple and Android devices, as well as desktop computers and online at webwiser.nlm.nih.gov. It then couples the information from those trusted resources with useful tools like an interactive protective distance map and comprehensive decision support, which provides first responders with the resources and knowledge to save lives and minimize the impact on the environment and physical property. Natural gas leaks. What is natural gas? Natural gas occurs deep beneath the Earth's surface. Natural gas consists mainly of methane, a compound with 1 carbon atom and 4 hydrogen atoms. Natural gas also contains small amounts of carbon, gas liquid, and non-hydrocarbon gases. It is used to generate electric power, as well as being used for multiple applications in industrial, residential, commercial, and other transportation sectors. There can be many things attributed to the causes of gas leaks, such as construction and digging. Gas leaks can come unexpected at the worst of times and can end up causing some serious damage, not only to the underlying piping system, but it also threatens safety and the well-being of persons in the area. Also, a way is improper installation, mechanical malfunctions, and of course accidental. All of these can be a serious danger to the public and of course to first responders. Law enforcement response to natural gas leaks and explosions. You want to check wind direction and stay upwind. You want to deny access to the area and evacuate all people in the affected area based on fire department recommendations or referred to Guide 115 in the Emergency Response Guidebook. Obviously, we want to detour traffic and locate potential witnesses that may give insight if illegal activity was the cause. Hazardous materials is a term that elicits fear in many because of lack of knowledge and facts. We have defined hazardous materials based on OSHA and DOT and a generally accepted definition. We discussed what a hazardous material incident is, identified several tactics, clues, and how to properly utilize the ERG to implement protective measures. Next, we discussed what WISER is and how it can be used as a resource to the first responder at the scene of a suspected hazardous material incident. Finally, we discussed the hazards associated with responding to calls involving natural gas leaks and protective measures to mitigate these types of situations. Hopefully during this course of instruction, You were able to define hazardous materials and the risk associated with them during a hazardous materials incident. Describe the duties of an awareness level first responder at the scene of a hazardous material incident. Hopefully you can list the methods used to recognize the presence of a hazardous material, to include the identification of the possible material or substance based on readily available clues. Demonstrate the ability to use the DOT Emergency Response Guidebook in identifying a hazardous material and appropriate first responder actions, to include notifying additional resources. Explain what WISER is and how to use it as a resource when at the scene of a suspected hazardous materials incident. Identify the occurrence of a natural gas leak and what protective measures to take to assure life safety until the leak can be mitigated. This concludes a portion of the 2018 in-service training for hazardous materials. If you have any questions, you can please direct those to me via email, or you can contact the training division. Thank you.